Welcome to the Right Time Podcast. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Look, man, we trying to let this Kyrie story go, but your man Dan Gilbert showed up at a press conference, and that's enough of an occasion to necessitate that we're going to talk about this. Now, one thing I noted from that press conference is seeing Dan Gilbert up there next to Kobe Altman, who may not have looked as you thought he did, even though his name is Kobe, but it's K-O-B-Y. Long story. Anyway, Dan Gilbert sat up there, no tie, didn't shave, not looking like $1 billion, but looking like he got $1 billion. You see, there's a difference, right? Like, looking like $1 billion, he up there sharp. Looking like I got $1 billion looks like I don't care what any of you think. And I feel like on one level, Dan Gilbert treated us both like he cared too much like we think, or like he didn't care enough what we think. And why do I say that? That man up there, I mean, does Dan Gilbert think I have sucker written across my forehead? Has Dan Gilbert mistaken me for the legendary Boo Boo the Fool? Because I feel like Dan Gilbert is playing us for Boo Boo the Fool in this situation. You may be familiar with Boo Boo the Fool. Your mama, for example, is not Boo Boo the Fool. Anyway, here's Dan Gilbert trying to play us like Boo Boo the Fool, talking about trade demand. What trade demand?
You know, I don't know the sources of the report that there was a trade request made. I read it in the media like some of you reported and some of you read, but we talked about a wide range of possibilities in the future. At that time, we had not signed Kobe yet as our general manager. These things are fluid. We think that Kyrie Irving is, one of the best guards in the NBA. We value his talent significantly.
So basically what Dan Gilbert is telling us is that everybody knows that Kyrie wants to be traded in the world, literally, except for him. Even though somehow he was in the meeting where Kyrie Irving said he wanted to be traded. Now, I understand why it is that he's doing this. They're trying to keep up the trade value, right? Like, if you know Kyrie is demanding a trade, then everybody knows that they won't offer as much. The problem is, man, that horse been done left the barn, buddy. It's out of here. Everybody knows Kyrie wants to be traded. The Athletic, new website, do good work over there. The Athletic is reporting that Kyrie is not even returning your phone calls. The horse done left the barn. Maybe Dan Gilbert just ain't country enough to be able to understand that we all know the deal. Like, I feel like if you tried to pass this off on country folk look back and just be like, horse done left the barn. He'd be like, okay, you got me. No. Dan Gilbert's going to tell us that no, Kyrie does not want to be traded. No, he doesn't. Why? I read about this at the same time you did. Of course you read about it at the same time we did, because that was the first time you got to read about it. The other time you were sitting there listening to it. Aha, loophole. That is how I believe Dan Gilbert is trying to play us. Shannon, it's almost like playing a loophole to allow you to get a mortgage that you can't afford.
Whatever works.
Whatever works.
Get in how you fit in.
Yeah. He also tried to tell us that the reason Chauncey Billups turned down the job with the Cavs was not money. Now, his argument was a plausible one, where he said that basically, look at all this money that I spend on players. You cannot make the argument that I'm too cheap to pay for something. And, I mean, I hear you, bruh, except your problem is we have Chauncey on our show from time to time. I don't know Chauncey personally, but Chauncey works here, right? Chauncey works at ESPN. And I feel pretty confident saying that if ESPN, someone that worked at ESPN was widely saying, hey, man, Dan Gilbert offered Chauncey Billups too little money for him to take the job. Stephen A. Smith gets out here with particular numbers. He is saying that you offered Chauncey Billups $1.5 million off the rip, and then eventually you got to $2 million. Like, he's putting numbers on this. Dan, we know, man. We know. Dan Gilbert out here on that same teenage sort of lie that your man Hugh Freeze was telling the other day. Remember, I told you Hugh Freeze is on that prove it strategy with telling that lie. Like, he's going to tell the lie, and we all know that lie is not true. And he's like, oh, prove it. Like, that's the game he's playing. Oh, prove that it's a lie. You can't prove that I lowballed Chauncey Billups. I mean, I may not be able to prove it, but we know, man. We know. Like, I can't produce for you like a tape to say that this is what happened, but we know you lowballed Chauncey Billups. Now, that makes everything else that happens in that press conference kind of problematic, because I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to believe you when you just tried to pass off two gigantic lies, right? Ginormous lies to us. Anyway, the man Kobe Altman was there. Shannon, I feel bad. I feel like Kobe Altman, it's about that time for him. Did you get that vibe? It's about that time?
It was close. He'll get there.
I mean, I think he's there. I don't know what he's waiting on because he appears to be there. Maybe it's just his mind that isn't in that place. Maybe that's what it is. Like, you know what his hairline look like? His hairline look like it's expecting a bunt. They're creeping in on the corners just to make sure they can get to the ball in time. Anyway, here is Kobe Altman. He wants you to know things aren't as bad as you think in Cleveland.
You know, me and Dan talk about it, but it's unfortunate sort of the narrative that's going on right now, you know, in terms of where we're at. This thing is not broken. We are a very successful organization, and we're going to continue to drive for that success. Get better and grow. Obviously, adjustments need to be made every year, but I want us to be very prideful of where we are as an organization and how good we've been and how good we'll continue to be.
Not broken, huh? I mean, and I know that Kobe Altman doesn't want to think about it this way, but if this thing wasn't broken, he wouldn't be there at that press conference, right? They went down to number 3 on the depth chart after the general manager got lowballed and then went out of there at a time where the team really needed a general manager. Now, I do agree with him on the argument that this has been a successful franchise, but being successful and being broken are two different things. Now, I think that people talk about, like, use the term broken perhaps too extremely. Like, maybe that's one of the issues that we've got here, which is that people talk about things being broken as though they are irreparably damaged. And no, I don't think that what the Cavs have going on is something that involves irreparable damage, right? Like, I think they have a situation that they can manipulate, they can maneuver, and turn it into something good. But no, bro. Your second best player is not returning your phone calls and is on the Instagram talking about, I'm coming home, and the world knows that he is requesting a trade. Hey, man, that qualifies as being broken. Now, just because it's broken does not mean that you cannot fix it. However, broken is what it seems to be. Who are you fooling right now? None of y'all are fooling anybody right now in this moment, except the only thing is, by and large, these are things that you have to say. Now, what I don't think Dan Gilbert had to say was, I don't know about a trade request for Kyrie Irving. If you just want to flow through this thing and pretend as though there is no trade request, okay, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that. But you're not fooling us with this other stuff, right? It is probably not as bad as a lot of people believe with your franchise. That being said, there's a reason that the homie Melo is not excited about coming to play with y'all. You know why? Because if LeBron leaves, nobody wants to be there. That's where everybody's stuck with. That's where you have everybody right now. So, I mean, I guess if you're Kobe Altman, you can't say, of course this thing is broken. I'm here to fix it all. No. This thing is not, we rolling. And maybe that's the answer they should be giving. Maybe that's the story they should be projecting. Nah, man, we just went to the finals for the 3rd straight year last year, and we're looking forward to going to the finals for the 4th year. Okay, I understand you. That's the direction you want to go in on this. All right, cool. That's fine. You can do that. But Dan Gilbert just sat up there and tried to play us, and I don't feel like any of us are really that excited about being played by Dan Gilbert. And I feel almost bad because I don't really have that many great suggestions on what it is that they should do. I do feel like they're in a good place in that there's a robust market for Kyrie Irving. There doesn't appear to be a shortage of teams interested in Kyrie Irving. I just saw on one of the television shows that the Timberwolves are making a strong play to get him. There are people that want him on their team, and you're at a point where people are high enough on him that you can sell before they realize maybe this isn't the greatest idea. That's where you are. You can do that. But you didn't have to get up there and tell us things that we know are not true. You know what Dan Gilbert basically did? He got up there and was like, yeah, fake news. He fake news. I mean, is that not what he is saying? Oh, no, Kyrie didn't ask for a trade. Fake news. No, of course not. Chauncey Billups. I would never lowball Chauncey Billups. Fake news. That's what he hit us with. Believe it if you want.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
The Ravens have a little bit of an issue. Joe Flacco is back. Not feeling so good. So, the Ravens are in a situation where they may need another arm in camp. Now, you always got to be a little worried when you hear people talk about they need another arm in camp, because another arm in camp doesn't really mean that much. Basically, we need somebody to throw the ball, just an arm in camp. But with Flacco going down, listen to what Adam Schefter had to say about what the Ravens might do.
They don't believe it's any type of significant back injury. They think he'll be back after a week. But backs are tricky. Yes. You don't know how they're going to react, and they need to have insurance just in case. So, again, John Harbaugh, brothers with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, Colin Kaepernick fan. Greg Roman on the Ravens staff, Colin Kaepernick fan. There's support in that organization for Colin Kaepernick. So it just makes some sense that when they go through this and figure out their options and discuss what to do next, I would guess, my thinking is that at some point they're going to say, okay, what do we think of Colin Kaepernick here?
Right fast. If I'm wrong, anybody correct me. Isn't Ryan Mallett their backup quarterback? Ryan Mallett has to be the guy that's like, whoa, wait a minute now. What about the fans? Like that was my immediate thought there, because Kaepernick is a better quarterback than Ryan Mallett. Like, if you want to say he's not better than some of these other cats you've been able to bring up, that's cool. He's a better quarterback than Ryan Mallett. Ryan Mallett's got to be sitting there like, no, we don't need a cap arm. I got two arms. If one arm get tired, I can throw with the other arm. You see how strong my right arm is? My left arm is just as good. I'm actually ambidextrous. Please don't bring him anywhere around here, right? Because if we're talking strictly on talent, Kaepernick is good enough to be the backup for the Baltimore Ravens. Joe Flacco keep playing like he has recently, and you might have a different discussion that you wind up having to have also. But this is an interesting thought here with the Ravens. If Kaepernick were to wind up there, couple things. One, doesn't have to start. B, behind a guy who is a Super Bowl winning quarterback, so the likelihood, honestly, like in reality, of Joe Flacco losing that job is probably very low. And Joe Flacco, I think the ACL tear notwithstanding, has been a pretty durable quarterback while he's been there with the Ravens, right? Kaepernick probably needs a year not dissimilar to that year that Michael Vick got out the joint, where they needed somewhere where he was on a roster but wouldn't play because then people wouldn't talk about him so much. Maybe that's the place he winds up. But I want to see how this plays and how this goes with the Ravens, because I think they ultimately may not call Kaepernick, because truly what's going on with Flacco isn't that bad. If it's really just like a 1 week back injury, then I think they probably wind up not making that call and not dealing with. As much as I think the notion of a distraction and a media circus is overstated, it will be noisy the day he gets there. Like, no matter where Kaepernick goes, the day he gets there will be noisy. And if he's only going to be there for a week, then no, you probably don't bring him in there for the day. But if Flacco's got something real going on with him, then yeah, they do have to think about it. They do have to consider bringing him in, because what better backup quarterback is there out there? The Chargers just brought in Robert Griffin, and I know y'all think he's sorry. Like, there's no disputing that one. Y'all think he is sorry, and it's been a while since he did anything to dissuade you from that opinion, right? Somebody's calling him. I don't think there's a better option to call right now than Kaepernick. So if the Ravens wind up needing somebody, like actually needing, then I say he winds up there. If it's a little short run thing, they probably don't wind up doing it. They probably don't. That being said, we are reaching a point where we're getting good answers, right? We're getting like different answers. Listen to this from Clark Hunt. He's the owner of the Chiefs. He said he would have, quote, no hesitation about signing Colin Kaepernick, who somehow in this one story was described as being embattled, which is a little bit of an uncomfortable adjective. But here's what he said here. He said, I really wouldn't about, hesitating about signing Kaepernick. Obviously, we have an interesting dynamic in regards to Colin in that we have Alex Smith as our starter. Because of that, I wouldn't anticipate that Andy would come to me with that. Is that because Alex Smith is their starter because he's a starting quarterback, or is that because Alex Smith is the starter and he and Kaepernick used to be on the same team until, the time Alex Smith got a concussion and then, never played again for the team? Maybe that's it. He says, but generally I'm not going to tell our head coach or our GM not to bring in a player if they think the player can bring us some success on the field and make us better. There are certain circumstances where guys get in trouble off the field, and that is something as an organization and as a family we care about. Now, I talked to somebody who knows the Kansas City front office, right? They've got a bit of a dilemma. They can't put Pat Mahomes on the field this year. He's absolutely not ready to play. Like, there's no way in the world that anybody thinks that Mahomes is ready to play. If something were to happen to Alex Smith, Mahomes is probably going to be the number 2 guy on the depth chart, because that's what you do when you got a first-round quarterback. They can't have that. They're going to need another quarterback if they're in any situation where they got to go to the backup. Again, A, what better option would there be than Kaepernick? And B, Shannon, you know a little bit about Andy Reid. Can you imagine what Andy Reid thinks when he sees Kaepernick?
About how big, how wide his eyes are right now.
Yes.
Like, think about what he's been able to manage with Alex Smith. And now multiply that by 2.
And the offense that he's running with Alex Smith, which everybody says nobody runs his own read anymore. Kansas City runs his own read, right? Like, Alex Smith does a lot of running in that way where Andy Reid has had this vision. We talked to Joe Banner about this months ago, where he talked about being the general manager of the Eagles and being like, look, Andy Reid has had this vision in his mind of a professional offense with a lot of the college characteristics thrown into it. Like, that's what he would want to do. Kaepernick is a dude who can do the things that Reid would want. And also, let's think of some of these other guys that Andy Reid has pulled up off the heap, right? There was Michael Vick. Didn't he go with Vince Young that one time? Kaepernick, he's like, oh, yeah, I could make that work. And that's interesting because it makes me wonder if Andy Reid has come to him and been like, this is maybe something that we should think about. Except I think it's easy for the owner to talk about, oh, sure, we would take Colin when you don't have any, roster spots.
All right, this is going to be a silly question, but I'll ask anyway. So, if you're Andy Reid, do you run this past Alex Smith? Not saying you have to get his approval, but do at least give him a heads up, unlike what you did at the draft and taking a quarterback in the first round?
I do feel like you need to tell him first.
Like, in this situation.
I do feel like you need to tell him first. Like, do you think Alex Smith even talks to Colin when he walks in? Because, generally speaking, it can often be contentious between the starting quarterback and the backup quarterback, no matter what, because the backup quarterback's coming to get the starting quarterback's job, right? Alex Smith he's going to try to start a whole seats-taken thing on Colin Kaepernick when he gets on the bus. Like, he's not really looking for this one. But you know what I found interesting? I think my man Pablo brought this up today on First Take. He made a very interesting point where he was like, how crazy is it that the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs in the state of Missouri is like, oh, yeah, we bring him in. Yeah, if he can play, we'd go ahead and do that. Versus the owner of the New York Giants, Big Blue in your Big Blue state, who's like, oh, no, our fans would revolt. The owner of the Chiefs is like, nah, we'd be all right. We'd be just fine. Which kind of leads me to believe, Shannon, that maybe John Mara didn't get all those emails that he says that he got. Because I feel like if he was going to get them, how many do you think Clark Hunt would have gotten? Right.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
All guests join us on the Shell Penzo Performance Line, just like our next guest. Check him out at presnapreads.com, one of the best film guys you can find out there. His name is Ken Fahey. Now, Ken, we were just talking last segment about Colin Kaepernick potentially going to Baltimore if they wind up needing somebody with a Joe Flacco injury. What do you think about his fit on that roster?
I think we talk way too much about Colin Kaepernick's fit in places, to be honest. Kaepernick has... if you look over the past 2 years, Kaepernick has thrown touchdowns more often, interceptions less often, and averaged more yards per attempt than Flacco. The question here isn't does he fit the offense and is he better than Ryan Mallett? The question here is why isn't he starting over Joe Flacco even when healthy? Because Flacco's been a mess the past couple of years. He hasn't been able to run his own offenses. He's constantly throwing the ball to defenders and underneath coverage. He's constantly not setting his feet when he releases the ball, leading to awful accuracy. Kaepernick gets painted as this guy who needs to fit in specific places. But he's played under Chip Kelly. He's played under John Harbaugh, or Jim Harbaugh, rather. And he's been, at the very least, no matter how much you criticize him, he's been competent in those schemes. And those are completely polar opposite schemes. Like in Chip Kelly, you're in the shotgun all the time. You're making quick throws. With Harbaugh, you're under center, executing hard play fakes and throwing the ball downfield. Kaepernick doesn't need a specific fit. He doesn't need a specific roster. He can fit in most teams at this stage.
Now, what you say about Flacco is interesting because he got all the money after they won the Super Bowl, and we really haven't heard much from him since then. So the things you're talking about that you've seen, are they recent developments, or have these been problems he's had all the time?
No, before the ACL tear, his footwork was becoming a major issue, and it felt like laziness. Like, he's got paid, he's got a Super Bowl ring. No one's ever going to question him as a starter unless he's absolutely awful, and the team is absolutely awful. And he was constantly, typically what happens with a quarterback in the pocket, if he's pressured, he will abandon his footwork to protect his feet so his knees don't get blown out so someone doesn't land on his feet. Flacco was doing that even when he was in completely clean pockets. And the problem is you're relying on only your arm to throw the ball then. You can't set your feet and establish your weight and put your weight through the ball. And it leads to the ball floating. So we talk about Flacco having this really big, strong arm, but that doesn't matter if you're not setting your feet. His deep accuracy has been awful, so much so that people tend to give him credit for pass interference, which is kind of a crazy idea in the first place. Because if he was that smart and that accurate, you'd think he'd just throw the ball to the receiver instead of throwing it for pass interference.
All right, we're talking to Key and Fade. Check him out at presnapreads.com. Now, we also heard Kansas City come up as an option. Now, they're in an interesting situation there because they seem to be about done with Alex Smith. They're saying everything but we're done. But they drafted a quarterback that really is not going to be ready to play anytime soon. What would you think about Kaepernick with Kansas City?
They've drafted a guy, a 2-first pick for Mahomes, who if he turns into what Colin Kaepernick was early in his career, you're delighted and you're hoping he develops into that guy. And Kaepernick has actually developed to a point where he's better in the pocket now. He moves more subtly in the pocket. He gets off his first read in better time. He goes through further in his progressions, and he can throw the ball against pressure. That wasn't stuff he did early in his career. He played in that offense where it protected him quite a bit. So if he's in Andy Reid's offense, which protects his quarterback quite a bit and relies on his quarterback's athleticism to diversify the running game and does a lot of shorter passes with shot plays so he doesn't have to throw intermediate passes, he would be fine in that offense. It's just a funny situation because they spent so much on Mahomes where they could have got basically what they hope Mahomes to be and kept both those picks and kept to make their roster better. Kansas City in general has had a very weird offseason, from firing the GM to releasing Jeremy Maclin, to Tamba Hali's rant. There seems to be something there that's not going right.
Well, also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the Chiefs' offense flies in the face of this idea that nobody runs these things that supposedly are the only things that Kaepernick can do, right? Because Alex Smith does a lot of that zone read stuff.
Oh, yeah, and Andy Reid with Tyreek Hill specifically, you will see he's always doing these little things just to get him into space and make the reads easy for the quarterback. Alex Smith is as much of a running quarterback as anyone else in the league. They use read option. They use designed quarterback runs. On third and long, Smith is looking to run rather than throw the ball and be aggressive. We all know that because that's the reputation he has. But Andy Reid is happy to sacrifice the options that his quarterback has to try and create one option where it's got a better chance of succeeding because he's doing so much to try and make that play work. It happens a lot with Travis Kelce. He will line up tight to the offensive line and he will chip the defensive end before going out. And what's after happening on the other side of the field is his receivers are running specific routes, not for them to get open, but to clear space for Kelce to get open. So Smith only has Kelce to throw to on that play. He doesn't really have other options. So that's the kind of thing people criticize Kaepernick for having to do. The guy like Alex has been doing his whole career and no one cares.
All right, we're talking to Key and Fahey. Check him out at presnapreads.com. I want to switch gears a little bit. Cam Newton, he's throwing the ball in practice. This is the beginning of getting ready for the regular season, coming off of that shoulder injury. He seems to resist the idea of taking a less of a role in the running game than he had previously. What did you think when you heard that?
He needs to stay in the running game, and it's not because he can't function without being in the running game. It's because that offensive line can't function without him being in the running game. When Newton is a factor in the running game, the backside defender, the edge guy that they leave unblocked, has to respect him and has to stay wider than he would normally with a quarterback who isn't going to run or who isn't threatening to run. And what that means is you can use all 5 offensive linemen and all the other guys, or a tight end if you have him in as well, and that gives you a numbers advantage for your running back. Newton, he's getting to the point where he is relatively old. He has taken a beating. He has come off his major shoulder injury. He did get concussed last year. Ideally, he wouldn't need to be used like this, but you're in an offense where you've got Kelvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess as your receivers. They're not going to have a consistent and efficient passing game. You've got Christian McCaffrey there. You can use him on screens and you can use him in misdirection with Jonathan Stewart on the field, but they have to do all this just to get over the offensive line. It's got very little to do with Newton because I wrote an article earlier this year about Newton being the NFL Steph Curry. Because Newton has a low completion percentage, but he throws the ball further downfield. He's an accurate passer who can do all these things. It's what the offense asks him to do.
Well, what do you think about him in a shorter passing game? Because I guess they're talking a lot more about screens and things like that than slants and outs. But what do you think about his accuracy in the short game?
I think he needs to get a little bit better at it, but we also have to take the whole context of how he was playing. It's harder to do these things when you're holding the ball under pressure and checking down to someone who's covered. It's harder to do these things when you've got receivers who can't actually run slant routes. Like Kelvin Benjamin can't get open on short routes. He can't get open on deep routes either, but that's another story. So if you don't have receivers who can get open on those routes, your raw numbers are never going to look good. I think he'll be fine with a guy like McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel, who was the second-round pick, who is going to be another one of these yak guys who's just put in space all the time. Mike Shula has to be smart and set these plays up properly for him to work. He has to be able to use more options and keeping guys into block. But I have no concerns about Cam at all. My concerns in Carolina are pretty much exclusively of what's happening around him.
Now, what do you think about Dak Prescott going into his second year in the league, where last year their record was good and he looked good, but I'm not sure he looked as good as a lot of people said?
Well, that's the funny thing. You'll find people saying Dak had the greatest rookie season ever, and then you'll have people saying he's Nick Foles. And I think he's the most fascinating player in the league entering this season because that statistical regression is coming. It's guaranteed to come. He threw 4 interceptions on over 400 attempts. That's only happened 4 times ever, and Tom Brady did it twice. So you can't expect him to keep repeating his efficiency. But if the way he can get better is by being more aggressive as a passer with Dez, by being more accurate on those types of passes into tighter windows, and by showing a different levels of trajectory in the ball so he can actually make different types of throws. Most of their offense relied in throwing intermediate routes. He was the 8th highest rate of throwing intermediate passes last year, and that's a huge number. And intermediate routes aren't easy. It's not like he's throwing screens. It's not like he's throwing short passes where the offense is setting it up for him to make an easy play and an easy read. Prescott has to sit back, show poise, come off different reads, move in the pocket to adjust against pressure, and find windows and throw with anticipation. He does all that. The only way he can get better is if he gets that little bit more aggression into those tighter windows deep downfield, so the offense isn't as inefficient as it was with big plays in the passing game like it was last.
All right, our last question for Kean Fahey of PreSnapReads.com is a question about Kean Fahey. The word is that you will soon be hosting a podcast for ESPN. You tell the folks about that.
Hello?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, I didn't hear you.
Oh, yeah, no, it's your time to shine, man. Tell the people about the podcast that's coming.
As you know, these things get announced and you're not allowed to say anything because you don't know anything. So I won't know anything for a month, but I'm going to be doing an ESPN NFL podcast before the start of the season, obviously, but I can't say much. It'll sound a lot like this radio hit just sounded.
Well, either way it goes, be sure to check that out. This is Kean Fahey. Check him out, PreSnapReads.com. Does great film work. Also, check out his quarterback catalog, which is a great resource, especially if you do a job like mine. Thanks so much for joining us, my man.
Thanks for having me, man.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
All right, now a lot going on in Cleveland. When that happens, you know we like to talk to my man from ESPN Radio in Cleveland. His name is Aaron Goldhammer. Aaron, how you guys doing?
Bomani, I was supposed to be on vacation this week, and then Kyrie demanded a trade.
You sound like Stephen A.
Yeah, we're right about there. The drama with this team, just never ends. And it's amazing to see how Cleveland has reacted to this news. I for a guy who hit a game-winning shot to win Cleveland its first championship in 52 years, how Cavs fans have turned on Kyrie Irving.
It was that hard.
Already. I mean, I think that Cleveland has that little bit of an inferiority complex that I think you're aware of by interacting with Cleveland fans on Twitter over the years. And I think that any time someone says, I want out of Cleveland, Cleveland's response is going to be just a snap reaction of don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out of town. But I think the Cavs and the fan base has to be a little bit patient and deliberate here because you don't want to just throw Kyrie Irving away in a trade where you don't net back enough assets to compete for a championship next year, which could be LeBron's last year in Cleveland.
Well, what do you think, though, about this general idea, though, that what they have there isn't enough for him? Like, is the idea that he just wants to leave for something better, even though it doesn't look like there's a better basketball situation, and that offends people?
I don't understand the way he thinks. So trying to psychoanalyze what's going on in Kyrie Irving's head, I haven't had a chance to talk to him. He hasn't given an interview since this quote-unquote demand came down and was reported by Brian Windhorst now almost a week ago. But this is what I think. I mean, he obviously is very close with Kobe Bryant. And at some point, Kobe wanted away from Shaq and to prove he could win it as the alpha dog. And Kyrie wants the chance to win it as the alpha dog. But I also get the sense that somewhere along the line, the relationship between Kyrie, the Cavs brass, and LeBron fell apart. I find it hard to believe that if David Griffin was still in place, that Kyrie Irving would be doing this. And I also find it hard to believe that if LeBron got more involved in the conversation here, that we'd be at this point. So the relationship there either needs to be mended or Kyrie is going to be gone.
All right, talking to Aaron Goldhammer of ESPN Radio in Cleveland here on The Right Time. Now, when I hear you talk about the relationship between LeBron, Kyrie, and the Cavs brass, like we're kind of talking about three relationships, right? Like LeBron and Kyrie, and then each of them with the brass. So what's LeBron's relationship with the brass these days?
Well, I think it's okay. He's been involved in the signings of both Derrick Rose and Jeff Green. There are reports out clearly from Chris Haynes of ESPN that LeBron will not waive his no-trade clause to go anywhere if the Cavs decided for some reason to deal him with it going into the last year of his contract instead of trading Kyrie Irving, who has the 3 years left, 2 in the player option. And there's no indication that LeBron is that upset with Dan Gilbert. He did tweet, about David Griffin's departure and wasn't thrilled when that happened. I think everybody was kind of wondering what Dan was thinking on that move. But I don't think LeBron has ever determined where he plays based on who the general manager is. It's never been the most important thing going for him in his career. So I think the relationship between the front office and LeBron is cordial. Do I think LeBron and Dan are texting each other and going on to Cabo on vacation with each other? No, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But I'm not sure their relationship is as bad as everyone in the national sphere wants to portray the two of them.
Now, speaking of Dan Gilbert, you don't get to hear from NBA owners very often. He came to the press conference yesterday, but I myself felt like Dan Gilbert tried to pull a couple fast ones on us. He tried to tell us the Chauncey Billups thing wasn't about money and that Kyrie did not ask for a trade. What did you think about that?
Well, I think that Chauncey Billups' thing was about the situation, and part of that was the money, but I also think part of it was I think Chauncey was a little bit aware of what was going on with Kyrie, number one, and number two, I think he was aware that LeBron was going into the last year of his contract and that it was just an unstable situation, not the right time for him. Okay, so that's number one on the Chauncey thing. I know that it was reported, and I believe it to be fact, that the Cavs offered Chauncey Billups the job, which Dan, for some reason, decided to deny at the press conference yesterday. I think Dan was lying on that one, okay? Number two, I think the Paul George thing, I think that the deal was really close. My understanding is that both the Nuggets and the Pacers had agreed, and the Cavs, and that they all three thought it was done, and that then the Nuggets and the Cavs were celebrating, and then the Pacers backed out. And I think Dan is still a little bit bitter about that, because I think he thinks that if the Paul George trade had gotten done and Love had been gone, that Kyrie would stay. What's funny is you'd think Love would be the guy who would want to demand the trade after the Cavs had him on the block for so long. He seems fine, and oddly enough, it's Kyrie that wants out, which I trying to piece that together in my mind is just crazy to think about.
Well, you specified right there that you think Kyrie would have been happier if Love was out. Is there any problem there, or am I just misunderstanding you?
I don't know, Bomani. I think Kevin Love is just a strange guy to have in the locker room, to be honest. And I think the Cavs now have gone through 2 NBA finals with him against Golden State. Of course, the first year he was hurt and out. And then the last 2 years, he just hasn't been a big enough factor. And I think that Kyrie might be more excited about the idea of giving it one more go and trying to win a second championship before he goes on this alpha dog thing. I also am not totally sold that they won't mend fences and Kyrie won't end up coming back. But it just feels right now like every day that passes, the drama keeps building and building and building and building. And at some point, there are going to be irreconcilable differences, period, between Kyrie and everyone in the organization, not just LeBron or Dan or Kevin Love or any one specific person. And he's going to have to move on. Oddly enough, I saw Eric Bledsoe was working out with LeBron and Derrick Rose today. They're close, and I know Bledsoe has been rumored in a lot of these trades. We'll see what happens from here. There's no deadline for the Cavs. They know they have to get good assets back for Kyrie, and they shouldn't be in a rush to do anything here.
All right, talking to Aaron Goldhammer of ESPN Radio in Cleveland here on The Right Time. Now, with Kyrie and LeBron, do you think that this is about not liking playing with LeBron or just not liking the fact that every day you are reminded that somebody else has more juice than you?
I think Kyrie feels like he should get the lion's share of the credit. He should get the statue and the street named after him for winning the 2016 NBA championship, because he hit the big shot in Game 7. And I think he feels like everyone's given LeBron the credit because he's LeBron, and he's sick of, A, being in LeBron's shadow, and second of all, I don't think they've ever really clicked together great. I think they're two great individual players, but I've never saw them as a great pair, a great duo to play together. Immensely talented, yes, But there have been games where LeBron tried to teach Kyrie a lesson and just stood in the corner for an entire half during a game. There have been a lot of YouTube videos circulating where LeBron and Kyrie, or LeBron is screaming at Kyrie on the bench, and that stuff from just 3 or 4 months ago. That's the Atlanta game from the end of the regular season this year. I'm not sure they ever had an awesome relationship, those two.
All right, talking to Aaron Goldhammer of ESPN Radio in Cleveland. Now, overall, I think you have an interesting perspective on Kyrie, because one point I make is, unlike LeBron, Kyrie knows what it's like to play for the Cavs when LeBron is not there. So, for these 6 years, what's just been your general read on him?
Well, I think he's grown up a lot in 6 years, but I think he has a little bit of immaturity and selfishness that make him a great player, but also sometimes make him difficult to work with as a member of the media, which no one cares about. But what fans should care about is it makes him a tough teammate sometimes. He would go multiple games without an assist. He has refused to try harder to become a better defensive player, which is something that could make him an MVP candidate down the line. I think he is offensively one of the most immensely talented players, Bomani, that I have ever seen in my 35 years on planet Earth. If you need 2 points, he can get you the shot. He's hit some layups, spins off the glass. Kevin Durant's mouth was agape sometimes during the NBA Finals watching Kyrie go to work. But I think he has some elements to his personality that make him a challenge that some other great players in the NBA history have had and some that haven't had. And the paradox is that those things make him a great player, and they also make him a challenging teammate, and they're part of why he's demanding a trade.
Now, have other guys bristled at the way that LeBron has dealt with them, or is this just particular to Kyrie? Because I see people broadening the question out to see whether they like what kind of teammate LeBron is, which is something we had never questioned before last week.
And I don't think I can ever think of someone else who's ever questioned it, to be honest with you. Through Olympic teams, I go all the way back to high school with LeBron, and his best friends were Drew Joyce and Romeo Travis, who he played with on a St. V team in Ohio that won 3 state championships. And I can't think of many other guys who have not looked at LeBron as a great teammate. I think he's a hard worker. He's challenged Kevin Love with some of this subtweeting on social media, the whole fit in, fit out thing. I've never heard Love complain openly or privately about LeBron as a teammate. Someone who covered those Miami years might have a better feel of what it was like with LeBron that first year than me. But I think this is new with Kyrie Irving because, Bomani, I think, and Miami people may disagree with this, I think Kyrie is the most talented. I'm not saying he's the best. I think he's the most talented teammate LeBron has ever had. And because of that, he's the only guy who's had the chutzpah to stand up to him on some of this stuff.
I didn't know the C was silent. I always thought it was chutzpah. It's kind of like Hanukkah, right?
Yeah,
Hanukkah
we can talk Yiddish a little
That's
later.
what I was about to say. It's a slow Yiddish lesson for me, and I think I learned more Yiddish from you there than I learned Spanish when I was in Miami. That is Aaron Goldhammer. Check him out on ESPN Radio in Cleveland. It is always a pleasure, my man. Thanks so much.
Love you, Bomani. Talk soon.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
All right, so I did First Take this morning with my man Pablo Torre. It's going to shock you, but we were talking about Kyrie Irving. I know, right? I didn't see it coming either. Anyway, we wound up talking about that. And Pablo had an interesting insight to offer here. Check it out.
I got a phone call. And the voice on the other end of that phone call is a trustworthy person. And he was saying to me that Kyrie Irving very badly wants to be a New York Knick. Kyrie Irving wants to come home. And so Carmelo Anthony in this scenario is kind of like the ghost of Christmas future. This is what your life could be. Don't be me. Help Carmelo Anthony prevent you from becoming Carmelo Anthony. Because the Knicks, Jen, you're right. We know what they are. They can't have nice things. I get why Kyrie Irving wants to play in Madison Square Garden. I get that he loves playing there, dropping all sorts of tremendous performances at MSG. Kyrie has done that, and we respect him more for that in New York. But this is not the right move for that dude.
All right, now, to be clear, we are not reporting that this has been the case, but Pablo is letting you know that he talked to somebody who knows somebody who has said that. I got a question. Y'all gonna judge the hell out of Kyrie if New York is the place he wants to go, right? Like maybe he gets a little bit of slack there because we cut everybody slack on the notion of going home because apparently all you guys just wish that you could go back home. But if Kyrie said, I want to leave this situation to go play for the Knicks, given the way that y'all value winners and determine that people are or are not winners, I mean, there's no more of a loser move than saying I want to go to the Knicks, right? Right, Shannon?
Huh? What?
I'm just saying, wouldn't that be a loser move to decide that you want to leave some champions to go play for the Knicks?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, Melo was on a team that only got out of the first round of the playoffs one time and then decided he wanted to go to the Knicks. Like, we could kind of understand in a way how that would wind up happening. But Kyrie is on a champion. How often do champions decide they want to go play for a bunch of losers, Shannon?
He wants to spread that championship mentality.
Oh, that's what it is?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. He wants to show them how to do it.
Absolutely.
He wants to show them how to be winners.
And more importantly, he wants to be the man while doing so.
Well, there's that, right? But Pablo made an interesting point there. And actually, I want you to hear this one more time. If you could play Pablo one more time talking about him hearing that Kyrie wants to play for the Knicks.
I got a phone call. And the voice on the other end of that phone call is a trustworthy person, and he was saying to me that Kyrie Irving very badly wants to be a New York Knick. Kyrie Irving wants to come home. And so Carmelo Anthony in this scenario is kind of like the ghost of Christmas future. This is what your life could be. Don't be me. Help Carmelo Anthony prevent you from becoming Carmelo Anthony. Because the Knicks, Jen, you're right. We know what they are. They can't have nice things. I get why Kyrie Irving wants to play in Madison Square Garden. I get that he loves playing there, dropping all sorts of tremendous performances at MSG. Kyrie has done that, and we respect him more for that in New York. But this is not the right move for that dude.
Here's the only thing, though. Melo was just fine being in New York until Phil Jackson made it impossible for him to be in New York. Like, with Melo being like, don't be like me, Melo was actually like, nah, man, I was living the good life till Phil started tripping. So what if Kyrie just happens to have some Melo in him? He just already has his championship. Like, Melo made the decision. He wanted to live in New York above all else. And so he went there. I'm sorry. He wanted to get his money, and he wanted to live in New York above all else. And by the way, every single one of y'all who judges Melo, you remember that, how he made sure that the Nuggets traded him so that he could get the full contract before he went there? The only people I feel like who are truly judging Melo for making that decision are those of you who have never had the state of New York and the city of New York dig off in your check. I just got my first check today. I went from Florida, no state income tax, to New York. Greedy suckers. They just ripped off my check, man. Like, there was supposed to be something else in my check, and I called and was like, yo, this other thing ain't in my check. They're like, yes, it is. I went and looked at the stub. It went straight to the state. They took all my money, man. I mean, not all my money, but enough of it that it's a dent. So, yeah, Melo, I understand why you wanted to get your money before you came to New York, because New York going to get a whole bunch of your money. Anyway, Melo wanted his money. Melo wanted to live in New York. Melo wanted to play in New York. That was the life that Melo wanted to live. Melo was happy until Phil Jackson tried to make it as uncomfortable as possible for Melo to live the life that we are describing. And that's how we wind up where we are, is that right there. Maybe Kyrie just wants to go to New York, because one thing about it, man, Shannon, you're a Knicks fan.
Yeah.
How excited would y'all be about Kyrie?
Oh, my gosh. Look, there was a guy, somebody on Twitter, or he may have been on ESPN Radio, who was talking about hashtag Kyrie to NYC. I'm just throwing that out there. But that's the Knicks way. The Knicks love, in New York, they love stars.
Right.
And although the plan right now would be to rock out with Porzingis and Frank, right? Mm-hmm. And let that be the plan. That would be the natural thing to do. But that's not how the Knicks do. That's not how New York does. They love their stars. Hashtag Kyrie to NYC.
We just had somebody teach us how to say Frank's last name, and we both have forgot already. Big Frank.
The homie.
Frank.
Frank.
Frank. That's all I got. Oh, excuse me. Francois. He is from France. That's what we will call him. France. That's it. We're going to call him France. It's short for Francois.
But the interesting thing with this in regards to Carmelo is, okay, we get it. He wants to go to Houston, but I'm interested that he's balking at the idea of being able to play with LeBron in Cleveland.
Yeah, except LeBron ain't going to be there before a year, right? Like, that's the thing. I figure LeBron's out of there after a year, at which point Melo has the option to get out of his contract. The problem is he would be getting out of a contract that he probably couldn't fetch on the open market. Is he going to walk away for $27 million just to leave somewhere? Probably not. Also, by the way, Ohio, they dig off in your check, in case you did not know. Ohio digs off in your check, and we know that Melo was very concerned with his checks. He's like, yeah, I want to play with LeBron, but not just for this, 1 year. That's not the program that Melo seems to be on. He wants to go to Houston. But it is interesting. The Knicks can't really get Kyrie unless they ship Melo out of town. Salaries matching, all that stuff. That's really the only way that they could do it. But for Kyrie, I do look at that. If you want to go to New York, that's cool. I just wonder, have you gotten used to winning? No, I'm serious, because he was losing in Cleveland before. Are you ready to go back to that life? Because you're going to be playing for some losers.
In regards to Kyrie, though, how much of this, if you think about his brand and trying to elevate his name to be up there with those top point guards? Because when you think of the top-tier guys that you name, or guards in general, Kyrie's name doesn't come up.
Yeah, and he's not going to come up if he goes there and loses.
He'll be seen. Granted, yeah.
Right. But we will say think about this. I have been arguing to the death with people for weeks that Chris Paul is a better player than Kyrie Irving. I don't really think that this is this is arguable. Chris Paul's a better player than Kyrie Irving. Dude, people are fighting me and wrestling me to the ground about this notion. There's really only one thing that you can say for Kyrie that you can't say for Chris Paul. Kyrie has a championship. That's it, right? So Chris Paul, who is quite possibly one of the 5 best point guards to ever play in the NBA. We're really talking about Magic Johnson, Oscar Robertson, and then we're getting into the Chris Paul, John Stockton realm of that conversation, right? That guy is being knocked for the fact that they haven't gotten past the second round of the playoffs. So now you put Kyrie on a team that will be his own team, and they go out there and start losing. We're not putting Kyrie's name on the top of the list. In fact, we're going to take Kyrie's name and put it down below on the list. Dame Lillard getting a little tired, by the way, of people talking about him. Well, Shannon, what did he say? He said, get my name out your mouth. My team's been 500 every year, which, by the way, you cannot say about Kyrie Irving. We will drop him below all those guys. Now, to be fair, Dame Lillard might be better than Kyrie Irving right now. John Wall is better than Kyrie Irving right now. But going to New York is not going to improve his profile in that way. If they lose, in large part, New York will eat him alive. Shannon, can you imagine that? The newspapers and what they're going to write? The one good thing he'll have going for him, though, a lot of those guys who covered him have been following him since he was in New Jersey. If he goes in, since he was in high school, and maybe they'll cut him some slack until that editor says, put Kyrie on the back page. And Shannon, it is Frank Ntilikina.
Did you remember that it was Ntilikina?
Nah, my man here who told us before how to pronounce his name wrote it on the screen again. Good looking out. You got a future around this place here, boy. I need that. Whatever your name is.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
We were just talking a little bit about what's going on with Kyrie Irving. Let's hit the phone and talk to Nick from Phoenix. Nick, thanks for calling The Right Time.
Hey, Bo, thanks for taking my call, man. I got to agree 100%, man. If he goes to New York, he could do well. His market value is going to start off high because of his success thus far. But he could go, they could lose, and his market value could bottom out, and now you got nowhere to go. So I have 2 questions for you. One, if LeBron were to commit to Cleveland for longer than a year, do you think Kyrie might be more likely to stay? Maybe not at this point. And 2, being from Phoenix, where would you throw Steve Nash in on that list of point guards?
Well, I tell you raised 2 very interesting questions there. Would LeBron staying longer term make Kyrie Irving more or less likely to stay in Cleveland, right? Because I think we raised a fair question that maybe Kyrie, because, all we are doing is guessing, right? Maybe Kyrie doesn't like the uncertainty. On the other hand, maybe Kyrie doesn't like LeBron James. I think that raises an interesting question that I don't really have the answer to. I would also like to point out to people that we talk about LeBron doing these 1-year deals and holding everybody hostage and da. Reality is this is year 4 that's coming up for LeBron now. If LeBron had signed the longest deal he could have when he first got there, guess what? He would still be up on the last year of his contract. Now, where do I put Steve Nash in the all-time list of point guards? I don't know what to do with him because we went from thinking he was a pretty good point guard to thinking he might be an all-time great point guard completely overnight, and he can't guard anybody. That being said, he might be one of the 5 or 6 best shooters in the history of the NBA when you look at it by numbers. Look at free throws, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, the whole 9. He's up there. Where he is all time, I have been grappling with that question for years. I feel like that man asked 2 great questions, and I gave him 0 answers. Like, not a single one.
And it's the fact that one of those MVPs probably belonged to somebody else, but we won't bring him up.
Well, one of them absolutely belongs to Shaq. Are you going to say the other one that might belong to Kobe? No, the 05 one belongs to Shaq. The 06 one can't belong to Kobe. He put up 35 points a game, not going anywhere with that team, and basically just not passing the ball to anybody else. Look at you, sounding like a Kobe stan.
Yeah, I'm trying. They say I'm one of these Kobe haters, so to speak. That's not the case anymore. I'm out here giving them props.
When did it stop?
Kobe system.
When did it stop?
You're welcome.
When did
Mamba
it stop?
out. Look at that. Look how cool I sound when I say that. Mamba out.
When did it stop? When did you stop hating Kobe? I need you to explain that to me. When did you stop?
You're welcome. Look at that. I'm cool like Kobe.
Okay. By the way, there's an argument that the 06 MVP actually should have either been LeBron James or Dirk Nowitzki. If you're looking at win shares, by the way, top 2 guys in win shares that year, Dirk Nowitzki number 1, LeBron James number 2. 8887. Wow, Dirk had like an all-time great season that year, and nobody really talks about it. Did you realize this? Dirk put up 27 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists a game that year. But that's what we called him soft, while carrying a team to the NBA Finals. All right, 888-729-3776. That's our telephone number. J.D. Power. Is it J.D. Power or J.D. Power and Associates? Whenever they got him in the car commercials, it's always J.D. Power and Associates. Either way, J.D. Power and or like with or without the Associates took a survey. Talked to 9,200 people, asked why they tuned in to fewer NFL games. And 26% of the people who said that they watched fewer NFL games said it was because of the national anthem protests like the one from Colin Kaepernick. 24% of those people then said they watch fewer games because of the issues with off-the-field stuff, such as domestic violence. Another 24% said that they stopped watching the NFL or watched less NFL because of game delays and like penalties that was slowing the games down. Now, of course, the great big old pull quote, the great big old headline is the leading reason that fans said they would not watch as much NFL football is because of the national anthem protest, which I'm sure will be on certain websites as, see, Kaepernick is making people not want to watch football anymore. But then I was like, okay, wait a minute. They surveyed 9,200 people. So this is not 9,200 people who stopped watching the NFL or watch less of the NFL. The total sample was 9,200 people. And I was like, well, gee, I wonder how many of those 9,200 people, how many of them said, no, I'm watching less football? 12%. 12% said they were watching less football. Okay? Of that 12%, 26% said it was because of national anthem protests. That is 3% of the total sample. 3%. Now, if you want to make the argument that 3% is still a pretty big part of the sample, I mean, I kind of see where you're coming from, but that ain't the same as the 26% that people are going to be throwing out there. You kind of got to read between the lines a little bit to get an understanding of what they are actually saying is the deal here, right? So that's 3% of viewers. And by the way, 3% of viewers, and we're dealing with self-reported information. Some of them just probably stopped watching. Like, I don't know how many of them actually stopped watching because of national anthem protests. And if you stop watching because of national anthem protests, like, I've tried not to call you the R word, but that really wasn't a thing after a couple of weeks. Because I know damn well you weren't watching the San Francisco 49ers. It was like, hey, man, Patriots and the Steelers coming on. You trying to watch? Nah, bro, why? Kaepernick ain't stand for the national anthem. Really, that one dude in the League of Thousands. Like that's the one that did it to you. That one dude in the League of Thousands. No, man, this is pulling a quote so that everybody can get all excited, and we're going to try to turn this into something, when in reality, we are talking about 3% of that sample and then dealing with all the dangers that come with self-reported information. All right, 888-729-3776. Talk to Mike in Alabama. Mike, thanks for calling the right time.
Man, how are you? I feel great today. How you doing?
Doing all right, man.
All right, so I feel like a divorced man that quit paying alimony because I just moved from New York to Alabama. So I feel for you with that paycheck. Woo! I got a third back.
I'm with you.
All right, so I got a question for you about Colin Kaepernick and why he's not working. I'm going to make you be the owner for a second of a football team, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So I work for a major car manufacturer. Where in the NFL do you decide, am I an entertainer? Am I an employee? And can I use my owner's platform for now, I support his protester. He has a right to. I believe in it. He puts his money where his mouth is. He's not even working. He's putting money out there. He's supporting groups. Don't agree with all his tweets. But if you're the owner and you got a money-making machine, do you really want those protests outside your gates?
Yeah.
I'll listen to you.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Mike. Where are these protests that you were talking about? We just went through a whole year of it. Like, how serious were these protests that you're talking about? And did the San Francisco 49ers lose any money? Because I ain't heard a word. Like, if they had, Mike, I appreciate the call. If they lost any money, I never heard anything about it. And I feel like if they had lost some money, you would have heard about it.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
All guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, just like our next guest. He covers the NFL for us here at ESPN. I saw him walking around today in his Easter suit. His name is Jim Trotter. Man, that was a bad jacket, man. I was looking around. I was like, is that a special occasion that nobody told me?
Look, man, we had enough people sitting up on that stage in their banker's attire. So, it's summertime. You got to liven it up a little bit. I like to wear colors, so I stepped out in it.
Howard University's own Jim Trotter joins us here on The Right Time. You sat down recently with Jerry Jones. Now, my first question, were you surprised at how loudly he said that there's no evidence against Ezekiel Elliott for a suspension?
No, I think he was clearly trying to send a shot across the league's bow, and he clearly has put the league in a very awkward position here because my understanding is that Roger Goodell is deferring to Lisa Friel on this as far as it relates to the allegations of domestic violence. So now you've got an owner coming out, and a very influential owner, and I would say arguably the most powerful owner in the NFL, saying that there not only is no evidence, there isn't even a he said, she said in this matter. So if the league now decides to take action against Zeke, I would think it would have to present whatever evidence it had to make that sort or to levy that sort of punishment. So it's clear that he's drawn a line in the sand and he is backing the league into a corner. So either he's going to look like he influenced this investigation and whether or not there was discipline, or the league is going to have to do something that maybe it doesn't normally like to do, and that's present whatever evidence it has.
Yeah, I was about to ask how the chain of information works here because we don't know what the NFL has, so I'm curious how Jerry Jones is so confident there's nothing there.
Bomani, you know as well as I do how these things work in back channels. And for Jerry Jones to come out in that way, he must know something about what the league knows. Otherwise, why would you paint yourself into that corner as an owner? So he didn't waffle on that. I mean, when he said there isn't even a he said, she said allegation, and you have the police department saying that there's no case there, Jerry seems to know something that we don't at this point. And that's why I'm fascinated to see what happens. Because, look, I've maintained all along, domestic violence is a serious issue in the NFL as well as society at large. But players have always been concerned about whether or not someone could levy an accusation against them that would be untrue, and yet it could impact their ability to earn a living. And now we have this case with Ezekiel Elliott, and it's been going on for over a year. And my question becomes, what is it that you don't know at this point that you can't render some sort of decision about there will be no discipline or discipline is forthcoming? How long does an investigation go on? How long do you hold that over the player's head? And I think at some point the league has to address this one way or the other.
All right, talking to Jim Trotter of ESPN here on The Right Time. Now, no owner has really fought the league on these suspensions. If Zeke is suspended, do you expect Jerry Jones to put up a formal fight?
He can, but at that point it would be up to the union to fight on Zeke's behalf, not necessarily the owner, because once the league issues its discipline, there isn't a whole lot the team can do at that point. It would then fall upon the NFLPA to say, okay, we believe that there are grounds here to fight this discipline, and it would go forward from there, and probably and obviously with the support of the team.
All right, we're talking to Jim Trotter of ESPN here on The Right Time. Now, Jerry's in an interesting place right now because they just released Lucky Whitehead, though they've had all these other situations with all these players with these more significant charges, and he's waited it all the way out. Is it a tough sell for Jerry to tell us that this was about this issue and not that they were going to cut him anyway?
Oh, it's definitely a tough sell. Look, Jerry has never made a secret that he grades on a curve. And the more talent you have, the more tolerance he has for your missteps off the field. And so knowing that, to now take action and say we're doing this, we're holding this player accountable for something that the player wasn't even involved with, that's a tough sell, obviously, on Jerry's part. So, to me, they would have done better just to come out publicly and said, look, this guy wasn't going to make our team. But then my question becomes, then why did you even bring him to Oxnard if you knew you were going to cut him and he wasn't going to make this team? So there's some questions that have to be answered, but it's just interesting that this is the player that they choose to stand on their hill or even die on the hill with over this issue.
Now, one thing about Jerry Jones is he believes the NFL should be out of the discipline business, that this should be left to the teams. Now, he also tends to have guys that get caught into these discipline issues, but is it a principle stand for him that he believes the league shouldn't be involved?
No, man, it's Jerry. If teams had control of discipline, there would never be a Cowboy player discipline, especially a star Cowboy player. You know that. I know that, and everybody around the league knows that. So I can understand why Jerry would say that. The interesting thing to me, Bomani, is that I have spent significant time with him this offseason for these features that we're doing on him coming up, including an SC feature this weekend and a longer piece before he's inducted into the Hall of Fame. And a theme that kept coming up, not only from Jerry, but from people around him and former players, is how important relationships are to him. And he will try and tell you that part of that is empathy, that he's been through some struggles in his life, early in his life, where he's been down on the bottom and he's had to claw his way back, and that he made mistakes early in his life, and so he doesn't want to give up on players the way someone might have given up on him because he believes people can change. Now, I ask the question in my mind, is that empathy or is that delusion, or is Jerry just, so enamored with trying to win that he's willing to make any excuses that he can for his players, for players who have missteps off the field? And again, I go back to what I said to you earlier. Jerry doesn't run from the fact that he grades on a curve. If you have great talent, he has great patience. If you have limited talent, he doesn't have much patience if you have a misstep. That's who he is.
Now, does he have backing around the league on this idea that the league shouldn't be in the player discipline business?
No. I mean, many owners don't want that in their lap. They like to hide behind the commissioner. There's a reason that Roger Goodell has made as much money as he has over the last 5 years or whatever it is, and that's because he takes the bullets for the owners. He does the dirty work for the owners. And I always find it fascinating that we, and I'm guilty of that at times too, we focus so much on the commissioner when we forget the commissioner is an employee. He works for the owners, not vice versa. So if you really have an issue on something that's going on in the NFL, you need to take it up with the owners and not with the commissioner.
All right, last question for Jim Trotter of ESPN. I want to switch gears a little bit because you recently spent some time with Matt Ryan. Did he convince you that he has put the Super Bowl loss behind him?
He did. Now, I don't know if everyone else has, but I believe that he has. Look, Matt is not the kind of guy who's going to say publicly, in most cases, he's not going to be critical of someone else. But he had issues with what went on at the end of the game, and I'm told he did express that to Kyle Shanahan some time ago. But Matt also knows that they have an opportunity to go back to the Super Bowl, and he genuinely believes that this offense can be as good or better than it was a year ago. And so from that standpoint, when he came back from the offseason, prior to the team starting its offseason workouts, he gathered all the guys down in Miami, and he said, look, I understand some of you may still have issues with what happened. This is the time now to talk it out. This is the time to get it off your chest, because once we step out on that field in Miami, we are closing the book on last season. And I believe that with him. And we're going to have a longer piece coming out on him during the season. And the one thing you will get from him is that if a team is going to recover from that kind of loss, it is going to have to be mentally tough, and it's going to have a quarterback who is mentally tough. And when you go through Matt Ryan's history, going all the way back to high school, you can see instances where he has had to overcome some things. And as I studied it, I truly believe there is not going to be this hangover, for him at least, from what happened in that game. I think he's driven. I think he's motivated. to go out and show that they can do it again, that they can get back to that game and take that final step.
All right, that is Jim Trotter of ESPN, soon to be in a GQ magazine near you. My man, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
After you, my friend.
One day, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Right Time Podcast. Please come back tomorrow for more. And don't forget to listen to The Right Time with Bomani Jones from 4 p.m. to 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.